Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Max Verstappen has predicted his chances of still winning this year's World Drivers' Championship in a critical weekend here in Singapore. Ferrari believe they could go strongly this weekend as well. George Russell responds to contract rumours, loads of other things happening on the day as well, including potentially Red Bull's driver lineup next year. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. As always, Media Day in Singapore. There was a lot going on. These are some rear wings just to have a quick look at, as it will come to no surprise. There's quite a lot of downforce on these rear wings. The McLaren, the Ferrari, the Mercedes, and of course the Red Bull. But I did want to talk about a few updates with regard to Singapore because there's a lot going on here. So firstly, there's a heat hazard officially declared for the first time. This was introduced for this season, and so far this year we have seen some of the drivers use this new cooling kit. Now I think George used it back in Bahrain. So effectively they put this suit on and they connect it to the car, and there is a current of cold air that flows around the suit to keep the driver cool in very difficult, hot, humid conditions like we saw in Qatar a couple of years ago, and pretty much what happens in Singapore every single year. So this has been officially declared. Now you might think that this mandates the use of this cooling equipment. It actually doesn't. I think that is their plan for next year, but there are still a few kinks they're going to work out. So the teams and the drivers can choose whether they use it or not, but they have put the heat hazard in place, which basically forces the team to make some sort of a decision. The key thing is, if you don't use the cooling kit, then you have to put some ballast in your car to compensate for that. So that's kind of the key regulation difference, is that with the heat hazard in play, if you don't elect to use it and you just raw dog the race, then you've got to put ballast in the car anyway to make sure that your car is no lighter than the competitors that are using it. So as a result, we probably will see teams go and do it. George Russell was pretty happy with what he used back in Bahrain. 16 degrees Celsius, water flowing around his body in a 50-60 degree cockpit. Probably puts you at a better spot at the end of the Grand Prix. Let's not forget when Russell famously crashed out of the Singapore Grand Prix a couple of years ago. Maybe if he had the cooling kit, it might have been a slightly different story, right? So that's the Singapore expectations for the weekend. There's also a big change which I kind of forgot about. We've talked over the last few days the fact that a two-stop in Singapore only really happens if there's a safety car. Now, safety cars usually happen in Singapore, but I don't think there was one last year. But they've increased the pit lane speed limit at pretty much all circuits now. The circuits that were previously 60, they've put it up to 80. Now, there has been some debate on whether this is sacrificing safety, but most circuits it's 80, and they've decided that the ones that used to be 60, they're now going to make them 80 instead. The key reason for this is to try and make pit stop times in the pit lane shorter so that we get more stops, we get more action, which is, when the FIA did this, they are inherently putting some level of safety against some degree of excitement. But I think it's a decision that I pretty much support, assuming that they have enough reason to suggest that 80 kilometers an hour is perfectly fine. So that is a change which may mean we get more stops this weekend than we otherwise might. Something that Max Verstappen might be happy about is this. So in the same way that Monza got pretty heavily resurfaced, and to be fair, there's been quite a few tracks. Spa got resurfaced this year, which is the main reason anyway, why the track record there was broken. Singapore, a similar story. There have been lots of resurfacing this year. Now, what this means is difficult to say. Does it mean there will be more grip? Possibly. I think the key thing that some teams will think about is, does it mean there'll be fewer bumps on the track? That is the point for Max and the Red Bull especially. We know that the Red Bull over the last few years has suffered over the curbs and over the bumps. It's been a problem in Singapore for the Red Bull. There are several corners that have now been resurfaced. There is localized patchwork done elsewhere as well. Turn 2, turn 3, 5, 6, 13, 14, 6, 7, 9, 11, plenty of corners that have had some sort of work done. Does this help cars that have struggled over the bumps? Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. But if you're a Max fan, there are some reasons for optimism this weekend. Talking of Red Bull, this is one of the other big announcements of the day on Alex Dunne. So you might first of all think, hang on a second, why is this Red Bull fan account tweeting about Alex Dunne, who used to be F2 driver junior for McLaren? Now, Dunne's been he's probably been the face of Formula 2. He's been involved in all sorts of incidents this season. He's had his spectacular moments where he shows great speed, and he's had some absolute disaster classes, such as in Monaco. But all things considered, Dunne has made himself a notable name, and teams are taking note because on his day he is very quick, although quite crash happy. I think that would also be fair to say. But he's been part of the McLaren Junior program, Irish driver. There's been lots of excitement about him potentially getting an opportunity in F1. But of course, it's not really going to happen at McLaren, right? It might. I wouldn't actually want to make too much of a solid prediction in terms of McLaren's lineup for the coming years, because I think that things could change there over the next 24 months. But you don't want to take a risk on that. They've got long-term deals, Piastri, Norris. I wouldn't expect them to be going anywhere. And if you're Alex Dunne, you're obviously looking at what's happened to Gabriel Bortoleto. He was part of the McLaren driver program. This was a tweet they made November the 6th last year. When he was part of McLaren, then they couldn't give him a seat. He had the opportunity at Sauber, and he's grabbed it with both hands and is currently performing like one of, well, the best rookies and even one of the better drivers in Formula 1 at the moment. I think Bortoleto's done a phenomenal job, certainly over the last 7 or 8 rounds. So for Alex Dunne, this was the question. What do you do with these contract negotiations with McLaren? Do you stay? Do you go? And Chris Midland says that McLaren have ended the contract and they've released him with immediate effect. McLaren offered him future opportunities, but an acceptable agreement could not be reached. So it seems like Dunne and his team pretty much played hardball with this. Like, McLaren were willing to bring him on further. It's not like they dropped him precisely. Now, yeah, you might say, oh, he's a bit of a liability or whatever. But look, McLaren wanted to keep him, it seems, but, you know, only at a certain cost and only to a certain extent. And Alex Dunne and his team were not so happy with that, given that they probably believe there are better opportunities available elsewhere. And I think that they are probably right. Autosport tweeted, Dunne's a free agent. For now, eyes emoji, hand signing something emoji. So I'm like, hang on a second, do Autosport know something the rest of us don't? Maybe not. But the reason why the Red Bull account is talking about it is because there have been some links there. Now, Eric Van Haren says that if he does go to the Red Bull driver program, he probably isn't getting a seat next year. This was a big rumour the other day that both Yuki and Lawson could be on their way out of the Red Bull family. Max isn't going anywhere. Hadjar is almost certainly getting the Red Bull drive, I would say, at this point. Which means, what do you do at Racing Bulls? Do you keep Lawson? Probably. But also, is he ever getting another shot at Red Bull? Probably not. And do you keep Yuki? Again, maybe you should, but does Yuki even want to stay? And what's the point? He's got the chance at Red Bull. He's probably never getting it again, assuming that that's how the season concludes. So as a result, there's been talk about Lindblad. Arvid Lindblad, also Formula 2 driver, who's done pretty well this season for the first half of it. The most recent F2 rounds haven't been quite as strong for him. But a few weeks ago, it felt almost certain that Lindblad would get the promotion, and I still think that he probably will. But some would say that it's too early. Look what happened to Antonelli and all of this. But there was a rumour that went around that maybe they would get both Antonelli, or both Lindblad, not Antonelli, and Alex Dunne into the Racing Bulls team at the same time. This kind of came out of nowhere, but I will say Alex Dunne is exactly the type of driver that Helmut Marko would want to have, right? Like, he's fast, he's kind of crash happy, and he's kind of exciting. He's the type of driver that would fit quite well in the Red Bull program. And we know that there have at least, I think, been some conversations there. And now Dunne is leaving McLaren, despite the fact that there was probably an offer there on the table, and they've terminated the deal as a result with immediate effect. So the feeling is that Dunne to Red Bull is a reasonable possibility, but if that does happen, it's almost certain that he will get another F2 year. That's what Van Haren says. Makes sense. If you're Red Bull, do you want to put Lindblad and Dunne both into F1 at the same time? You know, in my opinion, you probably just want to promote one of them, put Lindblad in, give Dunne another year in F2. You know, I'm down to give the rookies an early shot in F1 because I think that it probably helps them in the long term, but I can understand why you might not want to do that simultaneously. Even if they go and get the guy, that's also a good question in and of itself. So we'll see. But if Alex Dunne does join the Red Bull program, then he has a possibility for an F1 seat in 2027, which is frankly more likely than what he'll get staying at McLaren. So that's that side of things. Also talking about Red Bull, what about what's going on with Christian Horner? Because he has been linked to numerous teams to potentially return recently. There's two main ones, then there's a third one, then there's even a fourth one. So let me quickly break it down. Alpine, rumour, maybe they will give him some ownership. Horner wants to be the top guy, right? He wants to come in, make the decisions, take on some equity, which was the key thing that he was really missing at Red Bull. Yes, he's got the $100 million payoff, but he wants ownership of that team and he wants to make all the decisions. Alpine might be willing to give that to him. Aston Martin are the other team that might be willing to give that to him. So there was an interesting interview today with Andy Cowell, who's not, I think, technically their team principal, but effectively nowadays he is. And, well, he had a few things to say. It's pretty funny. He was asked the question, Horner's been linked, and he said, Christian's taking some time out. I wish him well. And then they were like, well, you know, is he joining Aston Martin? And Cal says, we've got a strong team. We build on the foundations. We've got a strong team with Adrian, and we're growing and building. And then they were like, all right, why are you not saying anything, right? Why are you refusing to deny that Horner is joining? And then he says, Horner's record speaks for itself. He's a great competitor. It's down to Christian what he wants to do. He might want to do something else. So, you know, Cal absolutely refusing to say anything on these rumours that have been emerging, that discussions there are going on, which means that they probably are to a certain extent. Two other possibilities here, one of which is actually a Haas. We did hear some rumours about this recently, that maybe Haas were interested, but apparently, according to the race, it was actually the other way around. Horner reached out to Haas and said, hey, you know, what if I came in and got the job? But apparently Haas are pretty happy with things. Happy with Komatsu. Makes sense if I'm Gene Haas making these decisions. But also it is interesting that Horner would be interested. I guess Horner looks at Haas, and I think for good reason, sees a team that he could potentially completely take over, completely rebuild in the same way that he did with Red Bull. And given the partnership they've got with Toyota Gazoo Racing, there is a future where they could have serious investments and they could become, you know, a serious force. As I said the other day, if Horner got that job, I think he would try and make it Toyota Formula One team and see how he could get involved there. But it doesn't seem like Haas want to do that, and probably understandably, but I don't think Horner would be interested in that if he didn't see some potential. The other outside possibility is actually a 12th F1 team. There were rumours about this from the race as well, that not only is there the appetite from a 12th Formula One team perspective, but Horner could potentially just simply bring in a new team with him being the primary owner of that development with loads of other investors. So Horner will come back. He will be back. The exact circumstances around that does depend. But let's talk about Verstappen and the chances that he has and the other drivers have in Singapore this weekend. Russell was asked to estimate Max's chances of winning the championship. We'll see what he said there in a second. But of course, you can't really talk about George without talking about Max, because that whole contract stuff is still up in the air, and Toto has done nothing to alleviate any of the questions that George gets every single weekend. He got asked, you got a contract yet, George? Like, you know, when are you going to get one? No updates to give you. I told you, you'd be the first one to know when there's something to report. Things need to be done right. It needs to be done with good care. There is nothing to worry about. It will get done when it gets done. So, look, we're now at the start of October, which is remarkably close to the end of the season. He then said, am I tough on negotiations? I don't think so. It's just a matter of finding a benefit for me. So, they're clearly, I mean, he's actually said quite a lot there in that sentence, that the delay is because he is negotiating, as is Toto, of course. Now that's what George is saying, right? He's like, well, if I wanted a deal done, I would have had it done already. But of course, George would prefer a deal to be done on terms that favour him more. And he's like, well, yeah, I am maybe negotiating a little bit strongly. He doesn't feel like he's being unfair in his discussions. You know, we're pretty sure we can read between the lines here and suggest that Toto wants a 1+1 year deal so he could bring in Max, and George wants a 2+1. And probably neither party is going to want to quickly budge on that until George is like, well, all right, Toto, I'll sign the dotted line. If I'm Toto, that's what I'm doing. But I think that George, at least if it has to be a 1+1, he can maybe negotiate better terms outside of that in some regard, or maybe just more money or something. I don't know. As George says, I've got to find a benefit for me in these type of conversations. Max talked about the championship. He said, look, if we win it, we win it. Great. If we don't, we don't. Life goes on. So, there's only one driver that gives reactions like Max, and of course, it is Max. But the questions were coming thick and fast to the other drivers. What's Max's chances of winning the championship? Now, George said in jest, because he was in the interview with Lando, he looks Lando dead in the eyes and says, 100% Max is definitely making the comeback. Obviously that's a bit of a joke. We don't know what George really thinks. We did get some answers from some other drivers. This was actually a very common question today. Intrigued to your percentage chance in the comments below. After Baku, I think the first number I said was 5%. And I don't think it's too much greater than that. As phenomenal as Max is, and even if the car is now the best car, a 70-point deficit in 7 rounds to a driver like Piastri, even Lando, but even if you don't consider Lando, to Piastri, who's been so solid. I mean, apart from Baku, which was horrific, all season he's been top 4 in quali, podium, podium, podium. It's just so difficult to overturn that type of a deficit. So, look, my gut feel still says the chances of Max doing it are incredibly slim. I said I think 5% after Baku. Maybe I revised it a couple of videos later to maybe 7 or 8%. I don't think I'm putting it above 10, but I don't know, right? Like, I think these numbers are not out of the realms of possibility, right? If you ran this championship 5 times in simulations, would Max win one of those times? Yeah, maybe. I'm saying more like 1 in 10, but yeah, intrigued to your thoughts. So Alex Albon says, I'll go 15%. I don't know, you'll get one crash between Lando and Oscar and it's game on. Leclerc says, I'll go 20%. Monza, Baku were low downforce. Don't know about the other tracks. Hadjar says 10%. 10's a good number. Lando responds and says there's a chance, it's more than 0. I don't know the stats. I don't know. There's probably actual stats. I guess maybe he means the betting odds or something. I don't know. Yeah, there's a chance. I mean, we all know Max, how dangerous he is when there's something to grab. There's a good chance. If he's got a competitive car until the end of the year, he can catch back up. So some of them refusing to give numbers. I'll give you a number, and these guys will give you a number as well. And actually, so will Max Verstappen. So Max was asked what his chances were, and this is such a great Max response. I remember this is a bit of a meme on the internet a couple of years ago, and I'm glad to see that it's not died out. So Max was asked, are you winning it? Like, you're not going to win it? What's going to happen? And he's like, look, the chances I win are 50%. I either win or I don't. So, win 50% chance, lose 50% chance. It's quality statistics here out of the world champion. But I thought it was pretty funny, right? He gave a response. It wasn't a particularly serious response. I wonder in Max's head what he thinks the chances really are. But I don't really think that he thinks about that or really cares. He will take it a race at a time. He will see what happens in Singapore. If he wins Singapore, he will feel like the chances are near enough 50%, I think, in his head. But for now, it is difficult to suggest that. So intrigued to your thoughts in a comment. I wanted to quickly talk Ferrari as well. We talked about Baku being a possibility for Ferrari to actually win, and I'm not going to lie, for the first day and a half, it looked like that was very much a possibility. Qualifying went wrong, the race was terrible, it is what it is. Now, Ferrari are looking for a new engineer, they want to bring somebody else into their new structure. They've got Sanchez, they've got Serra, they've got Vasseur at the top level. They've got an upgrade on the way, a cooling upgrade in Mexico, so we'll see what that does, if anything at all. But Hamilton is actually pretty confident. Of course, he's had a difficult few days with the passing of his dog Roscoe. He was asked the question by Ted Kravitz, was like, are you going to, race hard for Roscoe this weekend? And he says, look, I'm feeling positive. It's a track that I've gone well at. I've started to feel much better in the car since the summer break. The results haven't shown that yet, but it is going to happen. I'm hoping it's going to be this weekend. Historically, Hamilton's gone very well here, especially in qualifying, as we know. And the general feeling is that if the Ferrari are going to win somewhere, a more non-traditional circuit like a Singapore might give them a better opportunity to do so. They won here with Carlos Sainz, as we know, a couple of years ago. So, look, Vegas, Baku, Singapore were kind of considered out of the final few rounds the most likely chances for Ferrari to win. They have maybe 2 more of those chances, right? It didn't work out in Baku for various reasons. Singapore might not be impossible. Las Vegas, who really knows? But very much intrigued to your thoughts, as always, and all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.